And so in 1973, when I became the staff person for the Hudson Weber Foundation, I first heard of the Council of Michigan Foundations. I hadn't been aware of it before that, so I can't give any history prior to that. But in 1973, I became aware of the Council of Michigan Foundations and went to a conference, met people, and became very interested in it. And so in 1974, they asked if I would become the chair of the organization. Leonard White had, from the Kellogg Foundation, had been a long time involved in the council, and he'd been the chairman of the predecessor to the council called the Conference of Michigan Foundations, which was an unincorporated voluntary association which became incorporated somewhere around 1972, I think. And Leonard served as the chair of that group. And so for about 3 years, and he asked if I would serve as chair. And so in 1975, I accepted the offer and became chair of the council. Well, the first thing that happened is I got back to my office after I had agreed to become chair, and I got a call from Sophia Gorham, who had been the part-time secretary keeping things going for the Conference of Michigan Foundations. And she said, "I'm so pleased that you've agreed to be the chair of the council, or conference at that time, but I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to be leaving. For personal reasons, I have to give up this position." So my heart went down into my feet at that point. And so she said, "But I do have an idea, though, for you. There's a person that I know of that I think would be good for this job, and I think this person might be interested in the job, and so might have somebody that could fill in if you'd like to interview this person." And I said, "I surely would like to interview this person." And so she said, "Well, her name is Dottie Johnson." And so I said, "Well, fine, we'll arrange an interview." So I interviewed Dottie. And I found her to be extremely intelligent and interested in philanthropy. And in the interview, it became clear that she felt that she could make a difference in organizing and helping further philanthropy in Michigan if she were to take this position. And so I hired her on the spot. I was very relieved to have such a fine candidate presented for the position. So nobody else was ever considered for the position. It was Dottie was it. And so the rest is history. Dottie has done a wonderful job for the council. It got to be recognized nationally as well as locally for the wonderful work that she'd done in so many ways in furthering philanthropy. And so that was my good stroke of luck. I chaired the council from 1975 when we incorporated from the conference into the Council of Michigan Foundations until about 1978. And so those were the early growth years. And on the while we were coming up here registering, I asked how many people are going to be at this year's conference, and they said 800 plus, I think. And I can't really remember, but I'm not sure that it wasn't less than 100 when I first started would come to these conferences. Well, no, at the time, I just found that there was just a wonderful philanthropic spirit in the state of Michigan, and there were a number of just wonderful people that were involved with the foundations, both family and corporate, but mostly family at that time. And these people that were involved were all go-getters and were very interested in getting together and learning best practices and talking about what could be done to further philanthropy. And so we had a very strong core group of people, but I doubt that any of us had any idea what it might grow into. We knew that it was going to be good for us, even at that size that it was at that point, because there were a lot of bright people that we could share thoughts and ideas with and talk about program. But I guess I never really thought to dream about what it might evolve into that far down the road. Well, the '69 Tax Act had a lot to do with my being appointed as the first full-time staff person for the Hudson Weber Foundation, because all of a sudden there was quite a bit more that the foundation had to be watchful for in terms of how we managed our affairs and how we reported our activities, and also the amount of funds that we dispersed. And so the '69 Tax Act had a lot to do with me getting involved in the foundation field as a staff person, and then joining with the Council of Michigan Foundations. And there is one interesting experience that I do remember. We had the 1977 conference of the council at the Dearborn Inn, not far from where we are here today. And ex-Governor George Romney was at that conference and gave a very rousing speech, as he often did. And he got us all stirred up. And he was talking about the importance of philanthropy and government working together and not being adversarial, and the importance of the foundations making the effort to get to know the government people and work with them and to try to influence them to pass legislation that would be beneficial to foundations. And so that was a major topic of conversation after his speech at that conference, and we talked about that amongst our whole group. And so then that evening, Dottie and I got together and said, well, do you think we should prepare a proposal for the members for our session tomorrow morning that a CMF develop a proactive program to advocate for foundations with governments, both local and national. And so at the presentation, at the meeting the next morning, Dottie and I put forth that concept to the members who were attending the conference. And there was getting to be some considerable enthusiasm for that. And a man by the name of, I think his first name was Charles Strosacker, stood up and said, let's get cracking. And so right after that, then the full membership unanimously approved CMF entering into a program where we would staff up and develop a proactive program where we would set a bunch of objectives as to what we would like to accomplish, and then meet with governmental representatives both in the state and nationally to try to influence their thinking so that they would take a more favorable view than the 1969 legislation. And there was continuing concern after the 1969 legislation that there might be even more restrictive regulations put on foundations. So we felt it was timely to do that. Actually, I think I was continuously on the board until 2002, with the exception of a one-year hiatus where There was a policy developed over a period of years that an individual would serve 2 3-year terms, I believe, and then you would have to take a hiatus before you could be considered for a reelection to the board. So I did have a 1-year hiatus in there, but I think I served until 2002 on the board. Well, going back to the fairly early days, the board was it's a volunteer board, and it's a board of people that were most enthusiastic about furthering the state of philanthropy in the state of Michigan in particular. And the people were people that would roll up their sleeves and get involved, and we had a lot of very good conversations. But when we came to a vote, I think I remember every vote being unanimous. Everybody would get behind a concept, and everybody would commit to whatever the particular project was. And we had people that on the board that were business people, people that were philanthropists. We had people that were staff people of foundations. And it was a very nice mix of people, and there was no domination one way or another, but it was a very good, thoughtful group, very sharp people, and very committed people. I would like to just comment on the fact that I think the Kellogg Foundation should definitely be commended for getting the Council of Michigan Foundations going. Ross Mojave is sort of the grandfather of the Council of Michigan Foundations. And before I became involved, I'm sure he did a lot personally to get people to start meeting together and to nurture them along and to encourage them to get together for periodic meetings. And then Leonard made available an officer of the foundation, Russ made available an officer of the foundation, Leonard White. And Leonard was a very good first chair of the organization once it became formalized and incorporated. And through the encouragement and support of the Kellogg Foundation, I think a great deal happened. They also provided considerable financial support to the organization and to various projects that were generated by the foundation. So I think the Kellogg Foundation should receive a great deal of credit.